What are you choosing to focus on today? That's what you've been asked in today's daily episode. Hi there, and welcome to today's Gateway episode of the Find Yourself the Questions podcast. I'm Bernd Wensky, your trusty co-pilot on this journey to self-discovery and personal growth. This podcast is designed to be a personal challenge for you as the listener, having the greatest possible freedom without pressure or control. Welcome to another Gateway episode of Find Yourself the Questions podcast, where we explore the power of introspection and self-discovery through meaningful conversations with extraordinary guests. As you know, humans are emotional creatures. Emotions, both positive and negative, serve us in various ways. Negative emotions protect us by alerting us to danger and can be used to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves. By identifying our triggers, we can uncover beliefs in our subconscious that are not in harmony with our values, goals, and true desires. However, many are unaware of the power of our subconscious, which generates thousands of thoughts per day, most of which are harmful and repetitive. By understanding our triggers, doing the work to understand them, and shifting associated beliefs, we can elevate our default emotional state and respond rather than react. My guest today is Stacie Shifflett, a 3-time international best-selling author and the founder and CEO of Modern Consciousness, who comprehends the significance of leading a purposeful life. She firmly holds the belief that each of us can regain our personal power by making deliberate and conscious choices. Not just our big choices, but also the little decisions we make constantly throughout the day. How we react in situations, the words we choose, the thoughts we have. It's easy to get caught up in the fast pace of life, with the momentum of life pushing us forward, rather than intentionally creating the life we desire. What are the effects of living this way? Increasing frustration, stress, and resentment negatively impacts all areas of our life, including the lives of those we love the most and our businesses. Stacie's Elevate Your Life program is designed to guide you toward fully discovering your truth and reacquainting yourself with your authentic desires, truth, and values. Her program leverages her Modern Consciousness Association formula to develop an understanding of your current reality, including what you are creating and experiencing, gain clarity about what you truly desire to create in your future, and define practical, actionable steps to move your life and align your life with your authentic self. Today we want to talk about how to unlock the power of our emotions. Stacie Shifflett, welcome to the captivating Find Yourself the Questions podcast. I'm excited to have you on the show.
Hi, Bernd. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. Stacie, my first question to you is, how did you step off the emotional roller coaster? In other words, how do you stay present?
It was a long process for me, and I think where I learned the most about this skill that I've developed was going through my divorce, and I didn't do very well controlling my emotions early on. I had been married for 28 years, but what I did when I realized I just was holding a lot of anger and resentment inside of me about 2 years after the divorce, things looked really good on the outside. I was functioning all of the above, but I realized that on the inside I wasn't very happy. So I took off on a journey, and I invested in myself. I learned as much as I could about myself, from some of the top people in the world, Tony Robbins and others. I learned as much as I could about human behavior in general, because of course that gave me insights into me and the human condition, how we function as humans, how our brains work, and those sorts of things, right? So basically, by having an open and curious mind and intentionally seeking out information to improve myself, and then incorporating that information into my life and learning to embody new habits, that's how I changed. The latest iteration of me, that's how I changed.
Let us dive a bit deeper. So how did you begin to transform your life seriously?
Well, I sought some help, right? I had a great life, so let's not, I don't want to present that I didn't. I had a very good life. And I've always been very bold and confident and stepped into new things. And at that time in my life, as I said, I realized that I was holding on to anger and that it was preventing me in other ways of expanding in other ways, right? I really couldn't see, I couldn't see my future, as it were, right? The future that I thought I would have had imploded. I wasn't expecting to be divorced after 28 years of marriage. I figured that, we would progress as most long-term married couples did. We would retire and all of the above. So all of that as an option was gone for me. And sometimes when we've reached the end of our options and something is just no longer available to us, obviously there's a big adjustment period there, but that spurs us to look outside of what our expectation was, I think. I think we go through life with beliefs and expectations, and we think things are going to be a certain way, and they are not always a certain way. Change is inevitable, whether it's something we choose to change or if it's a change that's thrust upon us from some other source, right? And it causes a ripple in our universe is a more pleasant way of putting that.
Yeah. It's a nice picture.
Yeah. So, I knew that I had to take action to enact the next level of change in my life. Nobody was going to do that for me. It was my responsibility to do that. And so I fully embraced and undertook that responsibility. And I had a lot to learn. You don't know what you don't know. And it's not really until I started exploring, which has now been, a decade-long adventure for me. We're not really taught about how we adopt beliefs that may or may not align with our values and our goals. We set about on a course of life, often that we decided much younger in life, and we continue down that path, and we don't necessarily stop and look at it again as a whole, right? Very often we make quick decisions. I kind of liken it to, there's a lot of things that we do routinely, right? We routinely do maintenance on our cars. There's a lot of things we evaluate routinely, right? What our performance, our weight, we look at the balances in our checkbook, we look at all of these things individually and separate from one another. But we're not really trained to take a reevaluation of our life, right? To really sit down and conduct a reevaluation of the trajectory of our life, where it's going, how our day-to-day life feels, what's showing up for us in life, if we like it, and what we want to do to improve it, right? Even if it's good, it can be better.
Mm-hmm. We all have to get to know how conscious living works, and we have to learn how to deal with this, because there is no general education on how to live a conscious life. So everyone has to find his own path and his own ways.
And most often, I find it's not necessary, but most often people begin that journey when there's been a crisis, right? A crisis precedes the search. And there doesn't really have to be a crisis. You can take an assessment as life goes on. You might want to adjust your aspirations as life goes on, right? Is what you wanted satisfying you? And if it's not, then change it. You have to look at that. Or perhaps the aspirations that you had 10 years ago are no longer what you aspire to achieve in the next year of your life or the next 10 years of your life. So that's what I do with people in my Elevate Your Life program. We go through and we assess your current life. We figure out what you aspire to achieve or obtain, or how you want to feel in your life. And that's a really funny one, because generally when you ask people their aspirations, they really don't know. I didn't either, right? It's very common. And we architect a bridge between what is and what you actually desire, how you desire to be feeling. And then we align all of that, right? We do the alignment within your life to create steps, practical steps to move you forward and toward what you aspire.
Mm-hmm. Stacie, is there a definition of conscious living?
I think to me, conscious living is really bring full awareness and intentionality to every aspect of your life. That includes your thoughts, your beliefs, your habits, your behaviors, and also really digging down and understanding what your values are, right? Because I find in working with people, often the frustration is a result of not living in full alignment with your values, right? You're possibly doing and living a life that you thought would bring you happiness. You were told that if you did A, B, and C, that you would achieve success and happiness, but you find that on the inside, you start asking, gosh, is this all there really is? So I think to me, it's bringing full awareness and intentionality to everything. And you have to be open and curious when you undertake that exercise. You have to not be judgmental about others and about yourself in particular. And you have to have a lot of self-compassion and self-understanding.
Do you think people know their own values?
I don't know that they do, really. It's interesting. I have it's a character strength assessment that I do with folks that I've found that I really, really like. I can't think of the website that I use right now. It might be available from my website, but one reason I like to do it is because it highlights to people what their character strengths are, right? Their values, their virtues. And it's often surprising because we don't necessarily stop and think about that. We don't articulate them. We might articulate them in the way of Christian values, for lack of a better word, right? The behaviors that guide a sane and workable and collaborative society, right? Those sorts of things. But we don't necessarily look at our internal character strengths. And I think that it's so important. We criticize ourselves all the time, but we never really take the time to also celebrate recognize and celebrate our strengths.
Don't you think that we are very good in criticizing ourselves?
I think we're excellent at criticizing ourselves. I think that our society has, I think our various cultures have sort of created that, right? The institutions that we've been brought up in, and all well intended. Our families. We're always judged and gauged by some standard, but whose standard is that?
So we were talking about conscious living, but how do I notice that I live an unconscious life?
Well, probably don't. People that are not living intentionally and consciously probably don't even realize it. It's the way that our subconscious mind works. I believe 95%, I think it is, of what happens in our minds, which has 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, I think. All of that occurs in the subconscious. And I might get the statistics just a little bit wrong here, but they'll be close. I think about it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of the thoughts we have each day are repetitive, and 80 to 90% of those thoughts also are negative. And all of that runs from our programming in the background of our mind, and it influences everything that we do without our awareness. So that's why it's so important. I didn't know this until I knew it. All right, they don't teach us this, and that's why it's important to understand this information and begin to look at your life from a different perspective, right, outside of the tunnel vision that we've had.
Yeah, that enables us to live a more satisfying life.
Absolutely. I have a free PDF on my website. I don't know if you'll put it, I'm guessing you'll put it in the show notes, that explains all of this, and it's absolutely free, and it's 2 keys to increase your happiness and peace of mind, and it explains about the mind and how it works, and the amygdala, right, our little lizard brain that causes us to overreact to things, that keeps us in a perpetual state of stress and anxiety, right? I think that is the default for so many people, because we're so busy. We're so busy doing what we've already put into motion that our activities create the momentum in our lives and pull us forward. We're just trying to keep up. And somewhere along the line, we've lost the intentionality behind those decisions. An example I really love to give, it's popular here in the US anyway, is we enroll our kids in so many different extracurricular activities, right? Dance and soccer, and everybody's running, right? You're running from work to get the kids picked up, to get them to practice, to eating fast food in the car on the way because you don't have time for family dinner. And this is the routine. And while it's well-intentioned, right, to provide activities, structured activities for your kids and for them to learn new skills and build new talents or build on a talent they already have, it's all done from the best intentions, but it creates a lot of stress. So that's kind of what I mean about stopping and evaluating what's really important, and finding the balance between that and the other things that are important to you personally, to your family, to the life that you want to create in general. And we keep them stovepiped, right? We don't really stop and look at them all together.
Yeah, I will put a link in the show note to your PDF,
I'll be sure
so
to
that
send
people
that to you
can read it.
I'll be sure to send that to you if I did not. But it's free and it's handy and has a lot of good information, especially if you've never been exposed to it. And I do want to say one thing on that as well. Oftentimes we're exposed to knowledge. You might say, "Oh yeah, we know. Oh yeah, I read that, I studied that, I know all about that." but we don't take it to the next step and the next step, right? We don't implement it in our life, and then we don't fully integrate it and embody it as a habit. It takes effort. It takes intentional concentration and effort and repetition to reprogram your brain to think a certain way and to react differently, right, to situations. And when you start getting good at it, I can tell you from my own personal experience, sometimes you encounter something and you go, wow, look at that, right? I've accomplished it. I've achieved it. I am now different and better in a more positive way in regard to whatever that thing is, right? It didn't challenge us. It didn't trigger us.
So I know mostly we think that we know everything about it and that we know ourselves, but knowing about ourselves is not the solution. So the solution is to be on a path and to get to know yourself better, I think, and to improve and to really dive deep and to touch all the emotions and everything that's in your subconscious mind.
I think so. And to really understand, the human condition, how we work, how our bodies and our brains, how our nervous system, how all of that actually works, I think is very important. And I know you mentioned triggers in your introduction, and triggers can cause negative reactions in so many people, right? It generally triggers us into some sort of feeling, some sort of emotion, and it's most often associated. I mean, things obviously can trigger joy and compassion in us as well, but we generally think of it in terms, and generally use the word trigger, at least in the US, in terms of something that causes us to have a negative emotion, causes us to tighten up inside, what have you. And I have found, when you ask me how do you step off the roller coaster and what is conscious living, I think that triggers, our emotional triggers, are actually a treasure map to find peace. Because if we start to look at those things and dissect them and understand what belief is it that we have about that that's upsetting us, for lack of a better word, what belief do we have about the other person? What are we assuming? What belief do we have about ourselves? That's where the magic starts to happen, and it's a great way to unravel your subconscious.
Brilliant words.
Thank you.
Stacie, do you have 3 tips for our listeners to reinvent themselves?
I do. The first one is just stop making assumptions, and try that for 24 hours and see how easy it is. Right? So you really have to apply conscious awareness to notice. I have a little thing called NEAT. You've got to notice it. You've got to examine it. You have to attend to it in order to transform it, which is the T. But be open and curious. If you find yourself making an assumption about anything, stop and be curious and ask yourself, why are you making that assumption? What in you is being reflected? Just start to understand why you're making it, and don't rely on making assumptions. Don't even assume you know the answer to something, because you may not. You have an opinion, and begin to ask, especially with these modern times, and oh my God, there's so much going on in the world, in media and all this. I research, right? I believe that staying on top of current events is actually part of modern consciousness, but I don't accept what I'm hearing at face value. Of course, I have opinions, and I rely on those, but I also will do research on it. If I hear something, I'll go in and look to validate and verify. is that true, or look for alternatives. So I think to some regard, it's also don't assume that everything you're hearing is accurate, because most likely it's not. It has a perspective on it. It's shown to us through a lens, and we may not agree with that lens.
Number two.
Number two would be pause and reflect before you react. So I think that that's a very good skill to create. It builds your emotional regulation muscle. And it's really, again, not being triggered, right? We stop and pause before you react to something and fully empower yourself to make the choice that's aligned with your intentions and your values, what you really want to create, right? You really might not want to create another argument with your husband if he doesn't, load the dishwasher correctly, right? So continuing to react to those things, which really may not be that important overall, doesn't build goodwill, right? It begins to build resentment and anger, and it expands outward from there, right? So if we stop and choose and really think about what we're doing, think about how we're reacting, sometimes it's thinking of a better way to convey our message to that person, right? Because something like the dishwasher is really, I don't feel cared for and attended to, and that you're really honoring my needs, right? Makes me feel better when you load the dishwasher correctly, so it's pausing and reflecting and fully empowering yourself to create the circumstances and the emotions and the situations that you want to be experiencing.
I understand. So we got number three left.
Yeah, number three. Number three is listen to your little voice, your intuition, because she's always talking to you and she is always telling you what's important. Your intuition guides you toward your true needs and desires. We've all been in situations where we think, gosh, this just really doesn't feel right. And sometimes sometimes it's a very powerful feeling, and that is our intuition talking to us. But there's another side to that, in that it can be very quiet and just be whispering something to us. And our lives are so noisy and so active that we don't listen to the little voice. And I think the little voice offers us a lot of guidance.
Yes.
Those are my three tips.
Thank you. So before we move on, I wanted to pause and express my gratitude to you for being a part of this episode. Your thoughtful insights and engaging storytelling have made this conversation both informative and enjoyable. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and making this podcast even better. Stacie, where do we find you on the web? We told that we will put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. My website is modernconsciousness.com, and it is spelled just the way it's spelled, and you will benefit from having that posted in the link. And if you want to reach out to me, you can email me at empower@aware.life. EMPOWER at the word aware, because I like to live an aware life, and the .life is all 4 characters, LIFE.
Thank you, Stacie.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you listening and joining us today on the Find Yourself the Questions podcast for mindful self-empowerment and personal growth. I hope this episode inspired you to ask questions and discover yourself. Join us tomorrow for more insight, questions, and next month for inspirational discussions on your path to personal growth and happiness. Maybe you're just a question away from your best year. Thank you.